The Canadian forces have emerged from Afghanistan as a new army, far removed from our peacekeeping past. And here now with more on the transformation and the other changes the forces may be facing. Andrew Leslie, retired Lieutenant General from the Canadian Forces, and it's very good to have you back in this studio.
Thank you.
We haven't seen you here in a long time. You were on an old program we did called Diplomatic Immunity, and if I recall, you were in fine form and very humorous on that program, too.
Well, that's very kind.
We'll see who's writing your lines today. Let's start, as we consider the transformation of the CF, let's start with an excerpt from a lecture you've given for our sister program, Big Ideas, and then we'll come back and chat, okay? Roll tape, please.
As we transition from Kabul down to Kandahar, very different. Kandahar, if this were a map in the 17th century, could quite simply be one big sandy waste with "Thar be dragons?" ? We studied, we researched, we talked to locals, we talked to local authority figures, but franchement, we were not completely aware or even partially aware of the complexity and the dangers that we were about to face. Kandahar, a bloody activity. Literally every valley we went into had more of the foe. And if you waited long enough, more of them would cross from Pakistan, come and pay us a visit. And their remit was to hurt some of us. Now, through tragedy, we learned, and the forcing function was blood.
Can you just pick up on that at the end there, the forcing function? What do you mean by that?
The Canadian Armed Forces, indeed most Western militaries, are composed of great folk, those who choose to volunteer their time and defend their fellow citizens, go where their governments send them to protect the weak and the innocent. Having said that, the further you get from the front line, the more resistant to change in times gone by the large military bureaucracies have become. So by the time the Canadian Armed Forces, the Canadian Army, with great support from the Air Force and everyone else involved in that endeavor, was focused on peacekeeping. We were very, very good at it. Our structures, our process, our leadership techniques, our doctrine were all peacekeeping centric. Thankfully, we went into Kabul first, which was advanced peacekeeping, separating the warlords. But to get a large, ponderous organization moving like the Canadian Army, it required a dramatic forcing function, and in this instance, that forcing function was blood, the blood shed by those extraordinary young Canadians who sacrificed all, especially in the period of 2006 to 2010.
How did the bloodshed make it happen faster, more efficiently, etc.?
It focused the mind. In times gone by, it would take 15, 16 years of maneuvering around Ottawa to introduce new capabilities such as helicopters, tanks, guns, armor, whatever was required. To change doctrine in the Army was a process sometimes involving decades, doctrine being the way that we train our folk to actually do that which we're asking them to do. The whole idea of pushing authority and autonomy down to make life and death decisions, not at the level of generals or colonels, but at master corporals and privates, the spear carriers who actually get the job done. New structures, all that was accomplished within a space of about certainly two to three years, and the vast majority of change literally happened in a period of about 24 months. Remarkable.
Did it happen because of this revelation among the people who were running the CF, or the politicians who were sort of the civilian masters of it, if I can put it that way?
Well, soldiers only go where our political masters send us. In this case, I would say yes to both. So the Prime Minister and his cabinet were seized of the issue to do all that they could to better protect their troops.
Which Prime Minister are we talking now?
Prime Ministers, plural.
Plural.
So
okay.
That's Prime Minister Harper and the individual who preceded him, Prime Minister Martin. Of course, Prime Minister Harper, when he came in, not only kept the budget increases given by the Liberal Party, but essentially doubled down. So that allowed a significant amount of gold, taxpayers' money, to be spent on capabilities which were urgently needed. And the fact that casualties were occurring, sometimes 6 to 8 killed in a week with 20 to 30 wounded, acted as a unifying element across what can sometimes be a very fractured process, i.e. the acquisition of new capabilities for the Canadian Forces.
Did the CF themselves find it problematic that because we are an all-volunteer force, and because, relatively speaking, we haven't got as much of our citizens, economy, and so on invested in the military as they do south of the border, that a lot of Canadians didn't necessarily feel the hurt when somebody was killed over there.
In days gone by, I remember being told in the mid-'80s to ensure that aircraft coming home from the former Yugoslavia would land at night as they were carrying the remains of our fallen comrades, and we didn't want to, not we, but they didn't want to upset the local population. And I think the respect and honor shown by the Governor General, the Minister, and all the various dignitaries at the ramp ceremonies, the fact that we had embedded reporters acted as a unifying element across the land. There were many people who disagreed with the mission, but at the height, the most sanguinary period of the Afghan war, the public approval rating for the Canadian Forces was in the high 80s.
Have you gone to a hockey game at Air Canada Centre?
I have.
Do you see when, I don't know, in past years they used to call it Luke's Troops, right? Luke Shen, when he played for the Leafs, he would sponsor a couple of military people to come to the game. It's amazing what happens then and there compared to, say, 25 years ago, where they never would have made the announcement to begin with. The whole place stands up. People cheer. Why has that happened?
These are their sons and daughters, and they've responded to the call to arms. It is a volunteer armed force, like you mentioned. At the height of the Afghan war, when the fighting was the most intense, I, as the Army commander, had the unique privilege, I think, amongst all my peers, of having to decide who was not going, because we had more volunteers to go overseas and fight the good fight to protect the weak and the innocent than we had slots to fill.
Let's go back a bit. Before Afghanistan, what were our forces equipped to do in terms of potential missions?
They could do domestic response, fight floods, forest fires, help with search and rescue. They could do a wide range of tasks at sea. And of course, we had a capable Air Force. But in the Army, it was mainly lightly equipped peacekeeping forces with the possibility of augmenting to mid-intensity combat using very aged and ancient technologies.
So, I don't want to read too much into this, but ironically, our military couldn't actually fight a war. Is that right?
We could fight a war, but we would probably, well, we would not do very well, and the casualties would have been, they were bad enough, but the casualties would have been horrendous because the technologies that we had, the amount of monies we had to spend on training. By the way you mitigate against casualties is a function of training, leadership, and equipment. And in all three categories, we were ill-equipped for what we found in Kandahar.
And a decade later, since we got into Afghanistan, where are we now?
You, as Canadian citizens, are the proud owners of one of the most capable small armies in the world, superbly trained, thoroughly well-equipped, a little bit more to do in terms of armor protection for some of the vehicles, not so they can fight tanks, but so that if and when they're sent overseas, and by the way, that will happen, don't know when or where, but it's going to happen, they'll be better protected against things that go bang from the bottom. In other words, mines or improvised explosive devices.
But if before we could barely fight a war, or if we could, not that well and not for very long, how about now? What are we capable of now?
We are capable of sending a small brigade overseas for a finite period of time.
Brigade being how many?
Roughly 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers, and we could sustain anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 soldiers, incorporating all the wonderful citizen soldiers who join the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy from the reserves.
Have you got a guess on what the price tag of that transformation was?
In terms of the equipment acquisitions, in terms of the single most important price was the blood and lives of the fallen, because that was the impetus to get everyone moving quickly on side so that we can mitigate against that. In terms of the growth in soldiers between the period of 2004 and 2010, the Army grew by 3,500 additional young men and women in the full-time force. The reserves increased by several thousand, and probably somewhere in the order of $6 or $7 billion was spent on equipment acquisitions.
A bit of a touchy-feely question here, but as a military man, which military did you like better?
The one we have today.
Because?
Because the young men and women who have joined to answer the call to arms, be it at home or overseas, are better, faster, smarter, most of them at a remarkably young age. I mean, my daughter's only 24 and she's a combat veteran. They have experience of very complex endeavors in which lives are on the line. Their sense of responsibility is incredible. Their sense of initiative is staggeringly good. They know how to operate as a team, and it's a remarkably sophisticated and poised instrument.
Do you think people in the military prefer to be a war-fighting force as opposed to a mostly peacekeeping force?
I think most folk in the military who've been through the grind of combat don't like war. Having said that, I and many others have been on peacekeeping missions, for example, in the former Yugoslavia and Croatia, where a lightly equipped peacekeeping force suddenly found itself in the midst of a shooting battle, and all we had were pistols and rifles. Didn't end well.
Okay, I hear you, but which do people prefer?
I think the troops prefer that which they have now because it gives them a broader range of capabilities. They know that they can't be essentially ignored or bypassed when they're there to protect the weak and the innocent. There is a counter argument to that, of course, and that is if you have capability, the temptation is to use it. And that's purely a political question.
Okay, well, all right, speaking of which, new decisions are being made given the fiscal realities in the country, and we're not investing many new billions of dollars in our military in the way that we did perhaps, say, a decade ago. And so in that same Big Ideas lecture, you have essentially put forward the case that our military are now facing a new function, which is what?
There's a new forcing function arising, and that is budget reductions. Now, ordinarily, generals would huff and puff and say, no, it's not a good idea to reduce the monies allocated to any military force because you always want to essentially better prepare and equip your troops for what's going to happen tomorrow. And no one, quite frankly, can predict with certainty where we're going to go next, be it home or overseas. Having said that, the forcing function of budgetary reductions has the potential to be an excuse to transform the Canadian forces in certain cases from what they're doing now, the way they're structured, the process they have, the amount of money they spend on overhead, into something leaner, better, faster, smarter.
Leaner, better, faster, smarter, and therefore capable of doing what going forward? Certainly not Afghanistan, right?
They would be capable of doing a mission much akin to Afghanistan.
For 10 years?
The reason why the armed forces were able to sustain the mission in Afghanistan for so long resides on the people, which were the most fragile element in the loop. 'Tis always us. And in this case, the reserve organizations, air, land, and sea, augmented the regular forces in the multiple thousands. And I sincerely hope that the reserve model is not attacked or reduced in training because that is essentially the lifeblood of making sure that any mission the government chooses to send their armed forces on can be sustained over the longer term.
Let me read an excerpt from a report you did almost a couple of years ago now, Report on Transformation, and we'll come out of this with a question. Not only are we going to have to continue to live within our means and balance our books, we are going to have to carefully reallocate from within to meet the new and emerging defense demands of tomorrow that will drive us to be even more agile, more deployable, and more ready to respond. Our vital ground is our people, their equipment, and their training, all of which is increasingly expensive and has to be focused on producing capability for wherever the government chooses to send us. We are going to have to reduce overhead and invest in output. We have to become slimmer to trim the top and middle while protecting and investing in the various systems that result in the people in the ships, battalions, and squadrons of aircraft doing the tough and often dangerous work that Canadians are so proud of. In short, we are going to have to reduce the tail of today while investing in the teeth of tomorrow. And obviously, I need to know what that metaphor means. What are the teeth of tomorrow?
Since 2004, between 2004 and 2010, the Canadian Armed Forces grew by about 18% in terms of its people, and most significantly, by 50%, actually 51% in terms of their budget. That in turn allowed new people to be directed, in certain cases at the height of the war, thrown at problems. But a lot of that staff, a lot of that augmentation didn't go to the pointy end. It went to corporate overhead, it went to tail. Now, tail sounds pejorative, and it's not meant to. And there's good tail, which is a mechanic who's fixing a tank in CFB Petawawa. And there's not so good, which is probably a lawyer at National Defense Headquarters, and I'm sure I'm going to get some letters from lawyers very quickly. So the regular force grew by around 6,500 people, the reserves by roughly the same number, but most of the reserve growth was in headquarters augmentees. And most of that reserve growth was in regulars who retire, show up to work the next day at 85% of their normal wage plus drawing their pension.
And I presume that's not good.
No, that's not good. That's overhead. Though they're great folk doing work that was asked of them. And then, of course, you had a growth of around 7,300 public servants, the vast majority of whom went into overhead and corporate structure. So as you look to the future and you realize that the budgets are going to be reduced, because job one of just about every Western government is to reduce the deficit, got that, no argument. I don't think anybody anymore in National Defense Headquarters argues with Cabinet on that issue, though there was some. There was a lot of denial right after the report was first submitted. Bottom line is the tail grew by 40% and the teeth by 10% proportionally.
That's backwards.
Yeah, it's backwards. And a lot of the money went into consultants and professional services, enormous amounts. We can talk about that later should you so choose. Where you want to invest is those capabilities you need, not only today, but certainly tomorrow looking forward. So for example, cyber and cyber defense. More special forces operatives, those superbly trained young men and women who are amongst the very best in the world at what they do, mostly at night. You need more sailors going to sea. Right now, the Navy's about 900 sailors short. They're not in naval headquarters in Ottawa. They're in various staff functions, which have grown up since 2004. Get them out of there, get them back on ships or supporting those who sail. You need more intelligence specialists. You need more counter-improvised explosive device folk, combat engineers, highly trained who can go and make sure the bang doesn't occur. You need more people to handle nuclear, biological, chemical incidents, augmenting the municipal or the big cities when they have their response teams that kick in. You need more procurement experts for major Crown projects.
Boy, do we know that.
Yeah. How's that going?
How's that F-35 going anyway?
Yeah, there's some issues.
So how confident are you that this kind of complete turnaround of things, the people who have to make the decisions about those are going to make the right decisions?
Well, in the spirit of sort of analyzing the forcing function, I think the Prime Minister's done a very wise and clever thing. And so he said, look, everyone's got to contribute a fair share to reducing the deficit. D&D, your share, somewhere between $1.5 and $2 billion out of a budget which has grown enormously. By the way, starting in 2010, there's a process called strategic review, which took a first nibble at it. And then it was a deficit reduction action plan, which took another nibble. Now you have either transformation or defense renewal, whatever the flavor of the week is. I'm taking the money away in increments over the next couple of years up front. And I'm going to give you a list of things I don't want you to touch. And I want you to actually adopt transformation, certain principles. And I want you to reduce, using his words, reduce the tail and invest in teeth. So in other words, cut deeper than that which you've actually been told to do. Dig deeper. Find the resources so you can invest in yourselves, and I'll let you keep them. And that's a good deal.
That's the political directive.
That's a political directive.
Okay, so is DND doing that?
It's too soon to say. It's been 3 years since the majority of the work was done on this report. We've had a magnificent team. The only data points that I've seen so far are an increase in spend on consultants and contractors, which is unfortunate. 2009-10, they spent $2.77 billion in consultants and professional services, and now it's up to $3.25 billion. That's a lot of money.
That sounds like it's your way of saying they don't get it. I've made recommendations, and they're kind of being flouted.
Well, the recommendations are just that. There were 43 made. I would say, and I can say this because I was the leader of the team, about a third of them are damn good.
And 2/3 are?
Another third are requiring more work. Mind you, it's been 3 years, so. And another third are out there in terms of pushing the envelope into what a large, small c conservative organization can actually absorb in terms of new ideas.
A couple of answers ago, you did talk about some things that you thought ought to be untouchable. What are those things?
It was the belief of the team that there were sufficient resources and sufficient flexibility if you adopt new leadership principles, new process, and eventually new structures, that you would not have to go after the teeth units. Don't mess with the reserve units at the field level. Don't mess with the fleets on each coast. Don't mess with the wings that support the aircraft that fly. Focus your energies in the first instance on reducing the corporate overhead, which has been addressed by the Prime Minister. D&D spending more than 50 cents on the dollar in terms of its corporate overhead, and that's excessive by any Canadian corporation standards.
We're not at, well, I shouldn't say this. Are we still at war?
We have troops in harm's way doing good work training in Afghanistan, and let's not forget our sailors at sea. Every time they go out, the sea's trying to kill them. And of course, we've got aircrew who are patrolling up in the north and doing search and rescue missions. So
but are we technically still in a state of war with the Taliban in Afghanistan?
Well, I don't think we actually ever declared war.
Right, we don't do that, do we? We're just, okay, so our people are still in harm's way, clearly.
They are. That's the point.
Still clearly the case. But some people will argue we have fewer people in harm's way today than at any time in the past 10 years, and if there is a time to cut back on the teeth as opposed to the tail, as you've described it, now's the time. What do you think of that argument?
Well, there's an argument to be made that the teeth are already at a razor-thin edge in terms of the critical mass. So if the decision is to grow the tail more than the 40% growth that has already occurred, you begin to question what is your actual investment producing in terms of output. If most of your money is being sunk into buildings, being sunk into corporate processes, being sunk into multiplicity layers of oversight and supervision, it doesn't actually get out there and help repair a ship or fix an armored vehicle or train the troops, then when the next crisis occurs, be it domestic or international, and Canadians want output, they're going to say, okay, we've dedicated $18, $20 billion a year to this organization. They're not actually doing that which we want them to do.
Okay, so thanks to Afghanistan, we now have we have a transformed Canadian military, right?
It's on the path to transformation.
On the path. So if we're not there yet, what does the finish line look like?
I would submit the finish line is probably not far away. The continual degradation, or not the continual, but the degradation of the budgets or the resources allocated to defense will continue for probably 2 to 3 years. And you will get to a critical mass where unless you make the moderately hard calls as to what you stop doing in terms of corporate overhead, there will be no choices but to go after teeth. There will be no choices but to reduce the brigade budgets, for example. Well, let me give you a finite example that perhaps most Canadians can relate to. 15 years ago, in 1998, and I'm too young to be talking this way, I had the privilege and the honor of running 1st Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group, 5,000 great soldiers spread across Western Canada. My budget for the year was roughly $14–15 million. Then Afghanistan occurred. The cost of getting that brigade ready to go to Afghanistan was around $50–60 million in terms of training funds. That's gas and transportation for the troops, moving vehicles and people around, and food. That money's been taken away quite rightly by the government because we're no longer in that heavy, intense combat phase of Afghanistan. So it's gone. So if the baseline budgets for the brigade groups drop much below $15 million, that's like a canary in a coal mine. Look out. The same sort of logic applies to the fleet budgets on either coast. Those great people who go to sea in the ships, they need a certain amount of sea days to get them trained for whatever nature or the enemy, potential enemy, is going to throw at them. And by the way, being aboard one of those vessels in the middle of a storm, trying to board a suspect vessel, it's no time to be poorly trained.
Right.
So, and you need a certain critical mass, a flow of people in and through the ships to keep them going and operating. And yet we know the Navy's 900 sailors short. We know where the sailors are. They're in Ottawa doing staff jobs. Not in the naval staff, and not doing equipment procurement. They're doing other cubicle jobs, I'll call them. Some of those jobs are very important. Some not so much, not in comparison to keeping a ship going.
If you asked, this is my hunch, if you asked Canadians 25 years ago, what do we specialize in? They'd probably say peacekeeping. Today, should we be and I guess looking forward, should we be specializing in one thing as we kind of did back then?
It is possible, but if I were still serving, I would recommend strongly against it, because when you actually start a mission, be it fighting a flood or an ice storm, going up north, which by the way is sometimes more difficult than going on the other side of the world because of the logistics challenge, or you actually deploy on a peacekeeping, peace support mission, and it suddenly turns ugly, what happens? Lots of Canadian soldiers will die, the mission will fail, and of course those innocent whom you've been charged to protect will be slaughtered. So if you don't maintain a broad range of capabilities, then look out, because when you need it most, you won't have it. And there has to be a balance between that broad range and narrow focus specialization.
Let's finish up on this. And I know you've been asked this a million times, but I haven't asked you. And just seeing you today and how in command of all of these issues and the material you are, reminds me that you'd have been a hell of a good Chief of Defense Staff, which was a position you ended up not getting. And I wonder how often you still think about the fact that that isn't on your resume.
I'd retired. I retired in my last day of work. My last day of pay was a little bit later than my last day of work. Let's not go into that. I was on holiday. I retired at the time when the selection for this current Chief of Defense Staff came up. There were great candidates to choose from. And I think a lot of the brouhaha was started by a journalist who should have checked his facts with either me or the Prime Minister's office before claiming that there had been an interview. The Armed Forces has the leadership that it needs and deserves to take it to the next level. I can probably do more good doing that which I'm doing now.
Oh, come on. That's what people always say when they didn't get the job, right?
I'm gainfully employed.
No, I hear you.
I've done my time in uniform. Thank you.
I hear you. I know. But anyway, you got fans out there who think you'd have done a hell of a good job.
Well, that's very kind.
You
of
know
you.
that.
That's very kind. It's been an honor and a privilege to serve. And by the way, just because you take off your uniform doesn't mean you stop being a soldier.
As is apparently the case with you. General Leslie, it's really good of you to visit us at TVO again. Thanks so much.
Thank you, sir.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.